Have you ever wondered why, despite betrayal, insults, or abandonment, you can't seem to break free from her? Carl Jung once said, "Men do not love women. They love the feelings they had when they were with her." It's a powerful, unsettling thought, isn't it? Love not as a bond with another person, but as an attachment to an emotional state that you once experienced. This subtle yet profound insight lies at the heart of what many men experience in relationships, an emotional entrapment that becomes almost impossible to escape. But why does this happen? Why do men find themselves bound by an emotional cycle that they can't break, even when they know deep down it's unhealthy for them? The answer is buried in the quantum trap of love. Imagine this love is not just an abstract feeling, it is energy, it is vibration. The emotions you feel in love are real energetic forces that can literally affect the chemistry of your body, your brain, and your soul. These emotions form unseen connections between you and the woman you love. The moment you experience love, your energy becomes entangled with hers. And just like particles in quantum physics, once you've created that connection, it is nearly impossible to undo without changing your inner frequency. Today, we will dive deep into why most men remain caught in the quantum trap of love, why they feel as though they can't escape a woman's emotional influence, even when they're suffering. We'll explore Carl Jung's perspective on this energy entanglement and why men continue to be emotionally enslaved, unable to break free. What we are about to uncover is not about forgetting the past or shutting down your emotions. It's about transcending them. We'll explore how to shift your emotional frequency so you can reclaim your inner power, break free from unhealthy emotional patterns, and redefine what love truly means for you. When we talk about love as a quantum trap, we're referring to something far beyond simple emotional attachment. It's not just about feeling affection or desire for another person. At the deepest level, love is energy. It's a force, an unseen current that flows through our minds and bodies. And just like quantum physics, where particles can become entangled across vast distances, so too can our emotions become entangled with another person's. Imagine this: when you fall in love, your emotional energy gets locked into a specific emotional pattern tied to that person. This bond isn't just metaphorical, it's real. The emotional highs, the dopamine rushes, the intense connections you feel when you're with someone, it's like your energy and theirs have merged, creating a shared frequency. This is why love can feel like a magnetic pull, one that's difficult to escape, even when it's causing you pain. The science of emotional energy. In modern psychology and neurobiology, we know that emotions are not simply abstract concepts. They have measurable physical effects on the brain and body. When we fall in love, the brain releases a cascade of neurochemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, that make us feel euphoric, bonded, and attached to our partner. These chemicals literally change our brain's wiring, reinforcing the feelings of desire, intimacy, and affection. However, there's a dark side to this. The more time you spend with someone, the more you become emotionally conditioned to them. Your brain over time begins to associate their presence with pleasure. When they are absent, you begin to feel the absence of that emotional energy, which can lead to withdrawal anxiety and a feeling of loss. Now this is where the quantum concept comes in. Just like quantum entanglement, where particles influence each other no matter the distance, once you form this emotional connection, it's hard to untangle it. Even when you're apart, you remain energetically connected to that person. This means that your emotions are constantly being affected by their presence or absence, and this can become a self-perpetuating loop. The more you crave their emotional energy, the more you reinforce your dependence on it. The cycle of repetition. This energetic bond often creates a cycle of repetition. In quantum physics, entangled particles can have correlated behaviors that persist across time and space. Similarly, when you're emotionally entangled with someone, your emotional responses become conditioned by their actions. A small withdrawal of affection from your partner might trigger anxiety or longing within you, not because of anything rational, but because your emotional wiring is now tied to that specific response. This is why men often find themselves trapped in emotional cycles in relationships. They might feel compelled to check their partner's social media, wait anxiously for a message, or replay certain interactions in their mind over and over again. The desire for emotional connection becomes like an addiction. The emotional energy that once felt fulfilling now feels like a need that is constantly unfulfilled, which traps them in a never-ending loop of emotional dependency. The unseen power of emotional attachments. Socrates warned that emotional turbulence could destroy a man's clarity, his ability to think logically, and his autonomy. In the modern context, this quantum trap works similarly. When a man's emotions are tied to another person's behavior, his logical mind becomes compromised. The emotional highs and lows caused by the fluctuating dynamics of the relationship cloud his judgment. This emotional attachment creates a power imbalance. Often the man finds himself responding not to his own desires and values, but to the emotional cues of the woman he's involved with. The emotional responses of his partner become the emotional currency that drives his actions. When she is happy, he is happy. When she is upset, he feels the weight of that. The man becomes emotionally enslaved, caught in a web where his actions and emotions are dictated not by his own needs, but by the unpredictable flow of his partner's feelings. The trap deepens when men start believing that their emotional happiness is dependent on another person. They mistake emotional volatility for love, emotional highs for genuine connection, and emotional dependency for intimacy. But in reality, they are trapped in a cycle of emotional conditioning that keeps them constantly seeking external validation and affection. Breaking the quantum trap, the need for inner frequency shift. So how do men escape this quantum trap? The first and most essential step is to understand that the key to breaking free lies in shifting your own emotional frequency. Just like quantum particles, we are constantly vibrating at certain frequencies. Our emotions create a particular energetic signature that dictates how we interact with the world around us. The first step to breaking free is recognizing this entanglement that you are energetically tied to another person's emotional state, and that this connection is often built on unconscious patterns of emotional need. By becoming aware of this connection, you can begin to disentangle your emotions from the external source and take responsibility for your own emotional state. The second step is to regain emotional sovereignty. This means taking control of your emotional responses rather than being a passive recipient of another person's emotional energy. Start by practicing emotional self-regulation. This involves mindfulness meditation and practices that allow you to experience and process emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. By raising your own emotional frequency, you begin to build emotional resilience. You learn to be emotionally self-sufficient, to experience joy, peace, and fulfillment from within, rather than depending on the emotional fluctuations of someone else. This is not about closing yourself off or shutting down emotions. It's about learning to hold your emotional energy with awareness and control, rather than allowing it to control you. Love as energy, transcending the illusion of control. Once you break free from the emotional trap of dependency, you can redefine love. Love, when experienced consciously, is not about possession, manipulation, or need. It is about growth for both partners, individually and together. It's about connection without control. Love is an energy that flows freely between individuals who both maintain their sovereignty and share mutual respect. To escape the quantum trap, men must understand that love is not about becoming entangled in someone else's emotional web. Instead, love should be a mutual exchange of energy, one that doesn't diminish or drain either partner, but amplifies both. When you transcend the emotional loops that hold you captive, love becomes not a prison, but a shared journey of growth where both partners are free to express themselves authentically while supporting each other in their individual paths. Men often find themselves trapped in relationships where their emotional stability is determined by someone else's feelings. It's an invisible chain that binds them to another person's emotional fluctuations, and it can be incredibly difficult to break free from. The question is, why does this happen? Why do men so often become emotional slaves in relationships, unable to break free from their attachment? The answer lies in the way men are conditioned to process emotions, or more accurately, how they are conditioned to avoid processing them. Unlike women, who are often socialized to express and verbalize their emotions, men are taught to bottle them up, to be stoic, to avoid showing vulnerability. This creates a dangerous dynamic when men enter relationships, as they tend to rely on their partner for emotional expression and validation, unable to fully process their emotions on their own. The lack of emotional expression. From a young age, many men are taught that emotions are weak or unmanly. The stereotypical stoic male is praised for holding his emotions in check, for not letting anything affect him too deeply. While this ideal may sound admirable in theory and practice, it leads to the buildup of unexpressed emotions that find outlets in unhealthy ways. This emotional repression creates an emotional imbalance. Men often don't know how to process, express, or cope with their feelings in a healthy manner. In relationships, this emotional repression becomes a double-edged sword. Men who have not learned to identify, express, and process their emotions are especially vulnerable to being emotionally controlled. When they enter into a relationship, they may be drawn into the emotional dynamics of their partner without having the skills to maintain emotional boundaries. Emotions become a foreign language, and the partner's emotions take over, dictating the tone and direction of the relationship. This dynamic is compounded by the fact that emotional dependency is often masked as love. In the early stages of a relationship, it's easy to confuse the intense emotional neediness with deep romantic connection. Men often equate intense emotional reactions, be it passion, jealousy, or anxiety, with genuine affection or intimacy. They don't realize that this emotional chaos is actually a sign of emotional manipulation, not healthy love. The emotional hunger for validation. The second reason men become emotional slaves is the hunger for validation. This need for external validation is deeply ingrained in modern men, especially in the context of romantic relationships. From childhood, many men are conditioned to define their worth based on external achievements, be it in sports work or relationships. When it comes to relationships, men often measure their value through their partner's approval and emotional responses. This external validation creates an unhealthy cycle of emotional dependency. When a man is constantly seeking approval or validation from his partner, he is often willing to sacrifice his own needs and desires in order to maintain that connection. The emotional responses of his partner become the emotional currency he uses to determine his worth. This leads to a constant cycle of appeasing, where the man is always striving to earn love or avoid rejection, rather than engaging in a genuine reciprocal relationship. This pattern becomes especially harmful when the partner withholds affection, validation, or attention. The man who is emotionally dependent on the partner's approval will do whatever it takes to win back her affection. This is often why men stay in unhealthy relationships, enduring emotional manipulation, abuse, or neglect, because their sense of self-worth is so tightly tied to their partner's emotional state. The fear of abandonment. Another significant factor that keeps men emotionally enslaved is the fear of abandonment. Deep down, many men carry an underlying fear of being left behind, whether it's due to a lack of emotional security in childhood or previous experiences of rejection or loss. This fear makes them prone to accepting emotionally manipulative behavior, tolerating unhealthy relationship dynamics, and giving in to their partner's emotional demands, even at the expense of their own well-being. The fear of abandonment often keeps men stuck in unhealthy cycles. When a woman withdraws affection or attention, it triggers the fear that he might lose her. This fear often leads to overcompensating, trying to please her at any cost, and seeking constant reassurance that he is loved and valued. As a result, the man becomes increasingly dependent on his partner's emotional state, unable to establish emotional independence. In these cases, the man's inner turmoil becomes closely tied to the emotional fluctuations of his partner. He feels emotionally powerless and starts to believe that he is nothing without her. This fear of abandonment is so strong that it overrides his logical thinking, making him more susceptible to emotional manipulation. He fears the emotional loss more than the emotional damage that comes from the relationship itself. The impact of betrayal or hurt. When a man faces betrayal or emotional pain, whether through infidelity, emotional neglect, or harsh words, he often doesn't know how to process or heal from it. The instinct to shut down emotionally kicks in, making it difficult for him to fully let go of the relationship. Instead of moving on, he finds himself stuck in the emotional web of what once was. His emotional attachment is so strong that it keeps him bound to the past, unable to escape the feeling of loss. When betrayal occurs, the man's emotions become entangled in the idea of his partner, not in the reality of her actions. Freud's theory of psychological repression comes into play here. The man unconsciously pushes his own emotions aside to avoid the discomfort of confronting the hurt. Instead, he holds on to the image of his partner as he once knew her, the feelings of love, passion, and comfort that once existed. This emotional attachment becomes a prison where the man is unable to move forward. The fear of emotional disconnection, coupled with the unresolved emotional energy tied to the partner, keeps him trapped in a cycle of nostalgia and longing. He is emotionally enslaved to the past, unable to break free despite the present reality of betrayal or hurt. The need for emotional detox. The path out of emotional slavery is not easy, but it is possible. The first step is self-awareness, recognizing the patterns of emotional manipulation and understanding why you are emotionally tied to someone who may not be good for you. The second step is learning how to detach emotionally, which involves creating a healthy distance between yourself and your partner's emotional state. Men need to recognize that emotional independence is not about shutting off emotions, it's about regaining control over how emotions affect their decisions. This requires deep self-reflection, where a man learns to separate his identity from his partner's emotional fluctuations. By doing so, he can reclaim his autonomy, stop reacting impulsively, and stop allowing his partner's emotional needs to dictate his actions. By learning how to process emotions healthily, whether through therapy, journaling, meditation, or simple self-reflection, a man can begin to break the cycle of dependency. This emotional detox will allow him to reclaim his inner strength, his independence, and his ability to love without losing himself. Conclusion: reclaiming emotional freedom. Men often fall into emotional slavery because of unaddressed emotional needs, fear of abandonment, and a lack of emotional independence. But by understanding the psychological dynamics at play, by recognizing the manipulation, breaking free from the fear of abandonment, and learning how to regulate their own emotions, they can break free from the quantum trap of love. The first step is awareness, the ability to see the emotional patterns that hold you back. The second step is to take back control of your emotional state by focusing on self-love, emotional independence, and mindfulness. Only then can you love freely without fear, without dependency, and without losing yourself in the process. Breaking free from the quantum trap of love is not a simple task. It's a journey of transformation, one that requires awareness, action, and most importantly, a shift in your emotional frequency. It's about learning to detach from the emotional bonds that keep you tied to someone else's energy, and instead learning to create and maintain your own emotional sovereignty. But how can you actually escape this cycle of dependency and regain your power? The answer lies in a combination of mindful practices, self-reflection, and deliberate emotional work. 1. Cut the energy links, emotional detachment. The first and most critical step in breaking the quantum trap is to cut the emotional energy link. Every time you feel an emotional pull towards someone, whether it's desire, longing, guilt, or regret, you are essentially tying your energy to theirs. These connections form over time and become so strong that they feel like they define you. But this bond is not truly love, it's emotional entanglement, and to regain your power, you must learn to break it. How do you cut this connection? Meditation is one of the most powerful tools for emotional detachment. Through mindfulness, you can start to recognize when your emotional energy is being absorbed by someone else. By practicing mindful breathing or visualization, you can learn to observe these emotions without getting pulled into them. Breathing exercises allow you to center yourself and return to your own energy. Picture yourself cutting the emotional ties with your partner, not out of anger or resentment, but as a way of preserving your emotional integrity. Additionally, engaging in shadow work, a concept popularized by Carl Jung, can help you identify the unconscious fears or attachments that bind you to someone. Shadow work involves facing the parts of yourself that you have repressed or denied. For many men, this may mean addressing past emotional wounds, abandonment, fears, or feelings of inadequacy that have made them more susceptible to emotional manipulation. When you bring these hidden parts into awareness, you create space to release old patterns and disengage from toxic emotional ties. 2. Focus on self-love and emotional resilience. Breaking free from the quantum trap is about shifting your focus inward, away from external validation. Men often fall into the trap of looking for love and validation from others, especially in romantic relationships. But true emotional power comes from self-love. Self-love isn't just about pampering yourself or telling yourself you're enough. It's about creating emotional resilience, learning how to manage your own emotions without relying on others to regulate them for you. How do you build emotional resilience? Start by setting aside time each day for self-care, whether it's through physical exercise, meditation, journaling, or simply taking time to reflect. Build a routine that nurtures your emotional health. This will help you return to your core self whenever you feel overwhelmed or emotionally drained. In addition, self-compassion is key. Instead of beating yourself up for feeling trapped or emotionally dependent, practice being kind to yourself. Understand that these patterns are not your fault, but the result of years of emotional conditioning. As you begin to treat yourself with the same care and respect you would offer to a close friend, you start to create a solid foundation of self-worth that no relationship can shake. 3. Reframe your beliefs about love. Another critical step in breaking free from the emotional trap is to redefine your beliefs about love. The traditional view of love often ties it to possession and emotional dependency, that love means being emotionally intertwined with someone else, constantly seeking their approval or affection. This perspective is deeply ingrained in most cultures and relationships, but it creates a dangerous cycle of dependence. Instead, reframe your view of love as a mutual growth experience rather than a means of emotional survival. Love should not drain you or make you feel incomplete. It should amplify your sense of self, your purpose, and your independence. Healthy love occurs when two individuals come together as whole people, not as empty vessels seeking to be filled by the other person's affection. This is where Socratic wisdom and Stoic philosophy can offer profound guidance. Socrates believed that the greatest love was that which elevated both individuals, making them better versions of themselves. Similarly, Stoicism teaches us that true love doesn't make us lose control over our emotions. It teaches us to love without attachment to outcomes. In this sense, love becomes an act of freedom, not captivity. 4. Shift your emotional frequency through discipline. One of the most powerful methods for breaking free from the quantum trap is to raise your internal frequency, your emotional and psychological state. Just like quantum particles vibrate at different frequencies, Your emotional energy can fluctuate depending on your thoughts, habits, and reactions. If you remain stuck in a low-frequency emotional state rooted in fear, anxiety, or emotional dependency, you will remain attached to the person you love no matter how unhealthy that attachment may be. How do you raise your frequency? It starts with discipline, the discipline of your mind, body, and emotions. Practice mindful thinking and positive reframing. Challenge negative thoughts about yourself, your partner, or the relationship, and replace them with thoughts that are more aligned with your values and higher self. Physical exercise also plays a huge role in raising your emotional frequency. Regular physical activity helps you release pent-up energy, reduces stress, and allows you to feel more grounded and in control of your body. When you control your physical state, you also gain greater control over your emotional and mental states. Chapter 5. Develop emotional independence. To truly break free from the quantum trap of love, men must develop emotional independence, the ability to stand strong in their own emotional truth regardless of external circumstances. This means learning to regulate your emotions internally rather than relying on the emotional highs and lows of a relationship to define your happiness. Emotional independence does not mean becoming emotionally cold or distant. It means recognizing that your happiness and emotional state don't have to depend on someone else's approval or emotional state. It means standing firm in your own emotional truth, knowing that your worth isn't defined by how others feel about you. Start by building strong emotional boundaries, clear lines between where you end and where your partner begins. This helps you maintain your autonomy and ensures that you don't get caught up in their emotional storms. With time, you'll learn to love freely without fear of losing yourself. Breaking free from the quantum trap of love is not about rejecting love or shutting off your emotions. It's about reclaiming your power and learning how to love from a place of autonomy and freedom. By cutting emotional ties, practicing self-love, reframing your beliefs about love, and raising your internal frequency, you can escape the emotional entanglements that keep you trapped. When you understand the quantum nature of love, the way it binds your energy to another person, you can begin to shift your emotional frequency and reclaim your inner power. You no longer need to rely on someone else's emotional state to feel complete. Instead, you build a life that is grounded in your own emotional sovereignty. The man who understands and practices these principles is the one who loves freely and deeply without fear of emotional enslavement. Breaking free from the quantum trap of love requires a fundamental shift in how men perceive their emotional attachments and their role in relationships. It's not about rejecting love, it's about reclaiming your own emotional sovereignty and learning how to love consciously without becoming emotionally enslaved. This process is about stepping out of the reactive emotional patterns that keep you tied to someone's fluctuating feelings and instead taking control of your inner world. 1. Acknowledge the emotional energy connection. The first step in breaking free from the quantum trap of love is to acknowledge the emotional energy connection you have with your partner. This connection is not just metaphorical, it's real. Love, like all emotions, carries an energetic charge that binds you to the other person. When you are emotionally dependent, you are tethered to their energy. Whether they're present or not, their emotional state influences yours. Awareness is the key. By recognizing that your emotions are linked to your partner's emotional state, you can begin to disengage and reassert control over your emotional responses. You can start by observing your emotional patterns. When do you feel the strongest pull toward them? Is it when they're upset or distant, or when they shower you with affection? This recognition helps you understand the emotional triggers and start to detach from them. 2. Practice emotional detachment. Once you recognize the connection you need to practice emotional detachment, this doesn't mean shutting off your love or shutting yourself off emotionally. It means creating healthy boundaries. Emotional detachment means reclaiming your emotional energy. To To do this, practice mindfulness and self-regulation. When you feel overwhelmed by your partner's emotional state, take a step back and reconnect with your own center. Practice deep breathing, meditation, or visualization techniques that help you detach your emotions from their reactions. This is a gradual process of uncoupling your emotional state from their moods and focusing on your own sense of inner peace. 3. Rebuild self-worth and self-love. One of the most important aspects of breaking free from emotional slavery is to rebuild your self-worth. When you depend on your partner's validation, you allow their emotional responses to define your sense of value. This dependency erodes your autonomy and sense of self. Focus on self-love and self-care. Spend time investing in yourself, your passions, your interests, your personal growth. Take time to reflect on your strengths and what makes you unique. When you learn to validate yourself, you stop needing external validation to feel worthy or loved. Self-love is about recognizing that you don't need to be fixed by anyone else. It's about filling your own cup first so that you can give freely without needing anything in return. The more you cultivate self-worth, the less likely you are to seek emotional validation from your partner, and the more you'll be able to love them without attachment. 4. Set healthy boundaries. Establishing clear boundaries is essential for protecting your emotional space. Boundaries are not about control, but about ensuring that your emotional needs are respected. You must define what you are willing to tolerate in terms of behavior and communication in the relationship. Boundaries are not just about saying no to unwanted behavior, they are about asserting your emotional independence. You should be able to stand firm in your values, communicate openly about your emotional needs, and not feel pressured into compromising your own well-being to meet your partner's emotional expectations. Setting these boundaries will prevent emotional manipulation from becoming the norm and will allow both partners to thrive independently while still being deeply connected. 5. Redefine love as empowerment, not possession. Lastly, redefine your concept of love. Too often, love is thought of as possession, that love means holding on to someone, controlling them, or needing them to feel whole. But love, when truly understood, is about empowerment. True love should amplify both partners, not diminish one of them. It should provide space for growth, freedom to be authentic, and mutual respect. When you stop seeing love as a need to possess and start seeing it as an opportunity for both of you to evolve as individuals, you can let go of unhealthy emotional attachments. This allows you to connect deeply without the fear of losing your sense of self. Breaking free from the quantum trap of love isn't about rejecting love itself. It's about reclaiming your emotional independence, standing firm in your identity, and choosing to love consciously without losing yourself. The journey begins with self-awareness, recognizing how your emotional energy has been entangled with someone else's, and learning to break those connections. It requires emotional resilience, the ability to self-regulate your emotions and to rebuild self-worth that doesn't depend on external validation. When you shift your emotional frequency, you break free from dependency and become the creator of your own emotional world. True love is not a possession or a trap. It's an empowering force that enhances both partners' growth. Remember, you do not need someone to complete you. You are already complete. Love, when it's healthy, is about two individuals coming together to share, grow, and support one another while remaining autonomous and emotionally whole.